Wow, I'm just realizing now that I've been muted for the entire lead up of this show. So thank you to those that hung around, Robert. Appreciate you. Not sure what happened there. I thought I was unmuted, but um, we'll start right from the top. So thanks for tuning in. As I mentioned last week, we're going to do a bit of review on the draft. Um, my preview last week, bit of up, bit of down, some dark horses, etc. Kind of where things I might have been right or wrong. Guys that did move up, guys that did move back, and of course, some other developments. Yeah. Silent movie for a little bit. Sorry about that. Appreciate the heads up. Um, so I want to start with Will Johnson, and with him, I still think that he is the best cornerback in this draft in terms of pure talent. Now, the medicals, it seems, really scared teams, and I've seen some reports that there's suspicion that he may never get back to full strength, may never get back to full speed, and that even if he does, he may just have a small window. So I get teams trepidation to use a first round pick on a guy you think is only going to have a few years where he might be more productive. But I still think from a talent perspective, the Cards might have gotten a big time steal. And if his medicals aren't as bad as some folks are saying, he's going to be a huge value for them where they got him. I just think I love Jahdae Barron. I talked about him a lot last year. If you tuned into Tailgate, I still think Will Johnson is a better cornerback prospect at the NFL level from a pure talent perspective. Now, if the medicals are no good and he can't play, obviously that's never going to be true. So, I feel bad for the guy. It's kind of brutal if he does have that bad of a kind of medical, synopsis or diagnosis, but we'll see. We'll see as things progress. I had heard some reports that he was fine in terms of, where he was in his rehab and training and all of that. So some conflicting reports there, and we'll see. We'll see once camps open and the Cards get him in and can see what he's got in the tank. We'll talk about the elephant in the room here, Shedeur Sanders. I don't know what I can say that hasn't already been said by guys like Mel Kiper and Lou Riddick and so many others. And Michael Irvin was very passionate about it. I know there's a lot of folks taking some victory laps right now that said, oh, he's too cocky, he's too this, he's too that. There's some folks that have tried to play the race card. I think that's stupid. Cam Ward went number 1. Hey, Dad, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you. But yeah, Cam Ward went number 1, so you can kind of miss me with the race card thing. He and Shedeur have that in common, so it's not, that's not really an argument that holds a lot of, weight. But I do think there was something going on, and I think that the NFL doesn't like personalities bigger than itself. I think that Shadeur's confidence and brashness, and maybe that some people certainly could have interpreted it as cockiness, and some of the reports about interviews and stuff like that, that's going to rub people the wrong way. I also think he got some bad advice from Dad. For those that don't remember and those that do remember, we'll talk about it again. But Dion at his combine showed up and basically was telling teams, like, I'm not interviewing with you because I'm not going to be on the board. It just basically showed up with the Jerry curl, and he tells the story way better. But essentially, he showed up in much the same fashion that it sounds like some teams are trying to say Shedeur did. We don't sit in on those interviews, so we just have the reports to go off of. But overall, I think it's kind of embarrassing for the NFL. A bunch of lesser talents went ahead of him. This Tyler Shugg is a guy who might stick on a roster as a backup. The guy couldn't, like, if you just Google his name, you're going to see the most just unbelievably bad throw that maybe has ever happened at the combine, and he's the guy that did it. Like, it's bad. He was terrible at Louisville. He's not I don't know what team, the Saints saw in taking him. And then the Browns themselves took Dylan Gabriel ahead of him. And I guess they don't like his confidence in himself. They don't like him marketing himself. NIL is here to stay. And these college kids don't have to fake amateurism anymore. So I really think that the NFL is going to have to take a long, hard look at like how it evaluates folks. I think he did piss some teams off, but if you watch any of Cam Ward, he's just as fucking arrogant. He's just as cocky and just as brash. He just doesn't rap and he doesn't have big chains and whatnot, but he is that guy. They're the same. They're cut from the same cloth. So I keep telling people I don't want my quarterback to be a shy, bashful guy. I like my quarterback to be confident. And you know, I'll say it again. I said it last week. If he gets a fair shake and they don't just bury him, I think Shedeur Sanders wins the job in Cleveland, and I think they might have gotten the best quarterback in this draft in the 5th round. I just don't know that I have much confidence that they're actually going to give him a fair shake. They're trying to tank for next year's class. They may throw him out there after the season's over and everybody's quit on it and yada, yada, yada. And then if he stinks on a bad team, everybody gets to take another victory lap and say, I told you so. Fine. There was something going on with Shedeur. I did hear a theory floated, and yeah, they might have banded together and they might have, basically blackballed him. But I did hear a theory that the NFL was trying to keep ratings, trying to keep eyes on the television on day 3 of the draft, day 2 and day 3. And there's some validity to that in terms of an argument because day 3 of the draft was up 40% in viewership. I don't know exactly what was going on, and it might have been a combination of a number of things between Shedeur, his father, the NFL owners, and some of the GMs that might have been put off by some of the, if you want to call them antics, if you want to call the arrogance or whatever you want to call it, that might have been put off by it. There was something going on. We'll shift gears though. We'll get off Shedeur because I know all the talking heads are beating that to death, but. A little bit farther, I talked about Maxwell Hairston last week. Really liked him. I think he was one of the best athletes in this draft. The Bills got a good one, man. They showed him he was the star of the show. His seat was the last one on the way to like the tunnel as guys were getting drafted, and he was dapping up everybody. Not just his college teammates, which is what you see a lot. Not just guys drafted to the same team. He was dapping up every single person and giving them a big hug. And greeting him on the way out the door, and then his gratitude when he was drafted, and just they got a good dude, man. They got a real good dude. It sounds like he's going to be a really good locker room presence. He's going to be a really good young ball player for them. So I think they got a bit of a steal with Hairston there toward the end of the 1st round. TreVeyon Henderson, I love how much value at 38 the Patriots got. I know Bills fans probably don't want to hear that. I know the Patriots are a long way away, but TreVeyon Henderson is a guy that he's a 3-down back. He's a home run hitter, good pass blocker, and he can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think Drake May is going to really love sharing the backfield with him. Josh Connerly's a guy I highlighted last week. I thought he was better than where he was ranked. I love where we got him. Love that we got him. Now I get to watch him. I love the bookends of Tunsil and Connerly, who they expect to play right tackle. Kick Brandon Coleman inside, who played left tackle for us last year, was going to play right tackle this year. I think he's a better fit at left guard anyway. And then Cosme comes back at right guard. Biotish had a great year at center. Suddenly, we've got an O-line that looks pretty good, protecting, obviously, the most valued and prized possession we have in Washington and Jaden Daniels. Nick Scorton at 51, great value for Carolina. They quietly had a really good draft, I thought. I like production over the Underwear Olympics. I know a lot of folks put a lot of stock into the combine. Yeah, I think the Bills did pretty well across the entire draft, not just Hairston. I think they addressed needs. I know that there's a lot of folks concerned with wide receiver, but I think the Bills did pretty good. And I know there's a lot of folks out there that'll say, in Bean we trust. So I think they did pretty good. Nick Scorton, though, at 51, again, I like production more than the Underwear Olympics. I know Shamar Stewart moved up because he killed the combine. He's athletic. But, again, I'll reiterate, Nick Scorton had more sacks in one season in the SEC than Shamar Stewart had across 3 seasons in the SEC. So I'll take a guy who puts up good numbers against good competition over a guy who goes and runs really fast and jumps really high, but it doesn't seem to translate to the field. I'm still not in love with the Travis Hunter pick. I just don't know at the next level what we're going to get from him. I know he wants to play both sides of the ball. The Jags seem to legitimately intend to play him on both sides of the ball. I just don't know that he makes enough of an impact to justify that big trade up for the Jags. The Browns need to draft capital, and they did well with it. It was a good trade for the Browns. I just don't know that I see it with the Jags, other than the Khan family with their association with AEW as well. They're probably tired of empty arenas and empty stadiums. So maybe they view a local guy like Travis Hunter, who grew up in Florida, and maybe they view him as a guy who can sell some tickets. I don't really know. Matthew Golden, I think this is a little bit of an up and down. I mentioned he was listed at 16. I didn't love him there. I don't know that I still would have taken him in the 20s, but it's a more palatable number at 23, in my opinion, in terms of value and where the Packers got him. Ibuka went ahead of him, so I'll take a little bit of a victory lap on that one, but Golden's still going in the first round. One thing I will say, the caveat to all of that is, I think he's got a chance to succeed with Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love in that Packers offense, who has more, young, perceived to be good wide receivers than the Packers right now. They're going to have to figure out who comes, who goes in training camp, and it's probably not going to be easy for them. But they get a guy who can take the top off the defense, and I know that Christian Watson was that when healthy, but he's never healthy. So you look at a guy like Golden who runs a sub 4.3, and you say that's a guy now who can take the top off the defense. Malachi Starks, I didn't love him. Like I said, he was kind of wishy-washy, and he didn't have a great 2024. However, he went exactly where he should have in terms of team. The Ravens are the perfect fit for him. I still have I still question the use of a first-round pick to get him, but they had the luxury of being a contender without many holes, so I get it for them. Plus, having Hamilton in a stacked backfield, that'll help Starks. They won't rely on him to be a difference maker right away. He's a guy that can grow within that defense, and I think it's a perfect fit team-wise. Caleb Johnson nearly doubled his projection, going from 45 to 83, and I mentioned him last week as a guy I was really out on. I had a Steelers fan ask me about him right after the pick, and it immediately hit me. The comp for him, he's a smaller Najee Harris. They're basically the same speed. There's rumors that Najee ran a 4.4 in college, unconfirmed. Realistically, Najee was probably more like a 4.55 guy coming out of college. Much slower than that at this point in his career in the NFL. Some of the wear and tear has kind of slowed him down. That's what I see Caleb Johnson as. So, I just don't know, did the Steelers upgrade? They got younger. I don't know about an upgrade, though. We'll take a quick break here, and we'll get to the most important part of every episode. Being a veteran-owned podcast, we dedicate every episode to a fallen service member in our Folds of Honor sponsored segment we call Salute to Service. This episode goes out to Marine Corps Gunny Sergeant Diego D. Pongo and Captain Moises A. Navas, both 34 years of age when they perished. They died March 8th, 2020, while clearing a tunnel complex of Islamic State fighters in Makhmur Mountains of southern Iraq. They were assigned to 2nd Marine Raider Battalion, Marine Forces Special Operations Command, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Marine Corps Gunny Sergeant Diego Pongo and Captain Moises Navas, we have the watch. All right, let's shift gears back to our draft coverage here, and let's take a look at some sleepers. I mentioned some sleepers last week that I thought had a chance to be potentially good prospects. We'll see what the fit looks like for them. But I mentioned Oronde Gadsden Jr. He played at Syracuse. His dad played in the NFL. Both built similar, big, tall, strong, fairly fast for their size. He went to the Chargers, and man, oh man, is that the perfect landing spot. We've seen Justin Herbert have success with lesser, tight ends. We've seen him have good success with good tight ends. And Gadsden really is a pure receiving tight end, not much in terms of an inline blocker. I'm a little bit surprised Harbaugh made this pick because I would have expected him to, take a stab at a guy that was a little more of an inline blocker. But I think they're going to be able to get creative, split him out. He'll be away from the line of scrimmage, that sort of thing. And I think it's a good fit there with the Chargers. Could be a great pairing, him and Herbert. Atlanta getting Nick Nash for nothing. That's a very interesting situation. He wins the Triple Crown and he goes undrafted. I am surprised he went undrafted. I didn't think he was going to be a high pick. I thought 6th, maybe 7th round. Somebody would maybe take a chance on him. But in a draft that was really stacked with roster builders, there was a lot of really deep talent at in the trenches on both sides of the ball. There was a lot of deep talent at linebacker and DB, a lot of talent at tight end, and wide receiver was fairly deep, but not really tremendous at the top. There wasn't the Marvin Harrison Jr., Jamar Chase type. But I really thought maybe Nick Nash would go late. Somebody would take a stab at him. A guy that wins the Triple Crown. You think maybe there's some ability there to just, hey, let's expend a 6th or 7th on him. But Atlanta gets him for nothing. And there's precedent for an undrafted wide receiver to have some success. And it's a similar sort of guy. Small school, really productive, but probably overlooked because of measurables and the school they played at. I think this could be like an Adam Thielen type story. If Nick Nash comes in, wins a spot on the Falcons roster and makes a career for himself, carves out a career in the NFL, this really could be a very similar story. I hate that Holland Pierce went to Philly. I mentioned him last week, and he went undrafted, but he signed. I thought he might be a late guy that could be, could have some upside. Now I can't root for him because he went to Philly. And same with Kyle McCord. They both went to Philly, and I can't really I can't pull for them anymore. So I won't wish bad things upon them, but I won't be out here hoping that they are superstars for the Philadelphia Eagles. I do think Holland Pierce could be a very good old lineman in the NFL, though. I stand by that assessment. And he's going to be able to learn from some great ones. They've got a very, very good O-line coach, and they've got savvy vets, and they have the best O-line in football. So it's a good spot for him to come in and not have much expected of him, learn the ropes in the NFL, really work on his technique, his footwork, be solid. Very strong guy in blocking schemes, both running and passing, but a bit sloppy at times with his footwork and some technique stuff. So clean that stuff up. Unfortunately for NFC East fans, Philly might have stolen a guy that could end up being a pretty good offensive lineman. Just for reference as well, Philly has some precedents with undrafted guys. Now, he didn't cut his teeth necessarily with Philly, but Jason Peters is a guy that went undrafted and ended up having what will be a Hall of Fame career. Dylan Gabriel, I give up. I don't know what happened at quarterback. I mentioned Tyler Shugg, how the hell he went so high. Jackson Dart, I get the Giants move up, and he's a guy that's very intriguing. Cam Ward, obviously, at 1. But then it was like teams just, there was just no interest, and they were waiting until way late to get backups. But then Cleveland takes Dylan Gabriel over Shador. They took 2 rookies at quarter. Whatever. I give up. At this point, I think Dylan Gabriel is probably going to get buried on a roster and may never end up getting his chance to, win some games. I said last week I think a team could win some games with him, but I just don't know at this point. It feels like he's going to get buried on a roster. Let's shift gears to winners of the draft. And I'm going to talk about a few teams. I'm going to talk a few players here, but we'll start off with the Browns. I thought they had a good draft, with the exception of the 2 QBs thing. That was very confusing. I feel like there was some kind of backdoor collusion stuff going on in that scenario. But they acquired capital on top of having a good draft. Their cap situation is terrible. Obviously, the Deshaun Watson contract and where that leaves them. I believe they're already $5 million in the hole projected for next year, so they're going to have to figure all that out. Maybe it's a restructure with Myles Garrett, kind of how his contract works. Eventually, they're going to have to bite the bullet and let Watson go. But they looked like a competent franchise for the most part this weekend, which isn't something we can always say about the Cleveland Browns. So I thought they had a good draft in terms of who they picked and what value they got in various spots. And they acquired some draft capital, picked up a first round pick next year from the Jags in that trade for Hunter. And I think like I mentioned a little bit ago, I think Cleveland is in a situation that they are basically tanking without telling everybody they're tanking for the 2026 quarterback class, which there's a number of guys, and there's going to be a couple more that are going to present themselves. This could be much like last year where we had 6 guys go early. This quarterback class coming in 2026, if Arch declares early, there's just a plethora of guys that are already projected to be first round quarterbacks in next year's draft. So teams like the Browns and some of the other folks that maybe didn't address their situation, the Raiders, right? The Raiders might be in that similar situation depending on whether they can get it going with Geno right away. Seattle, another team, they signed Darnold, but they, if things don't work out with Darnold, they might be in the running for picking up their quarterback of the future. So there's going to be some teams that are looking ahead to 2026 potentially to a much better quarterback class, and I think the Browns were one of them. Drake May's a winner, in my opinion. Will Campbell and Trey Henderson, great additions. I think Will Campbell, he's a guy that he certainly could have been, if we throw back to the days of, Orlando Pace and some of the Jonathan Ogden and those guys that go super early in the draft. He's that, in my opinion, in terms of his pure talent and his ability to play the blind side in an offense and hold up. He gets a knock on his arm size, his arm length. But he was great in the SEC against some really good competition. So I think the Patriots addressed a couple of big things on offense, and then Kyle Williams is a sneaky playmaker. Keep that name in mind as you watch this season progress for the Patriots. He could potentially be maybe a guy at wide receiver that makes some plays for them in an offense that really doesn't have that. They took Jalen Polk last year, and he flopped for them, and they've tried. Belichick tried for years to address the wide receiver position. They weren't able to. With these 3 guys added to the offense, Drake May, I think, is feeling pretty good. On top of some, they made a trade this offseason to get, to address up front as well. So Drake May, protect the asset. I mentioned it with Washington. New England needs to do the same thing, and it looks like in this draft they made a concerted effort to do so. The Ravens won. They had the luxury pick with Starks that I mentioned. And then Mike Green is a huge steal with one big caveat. If the allegations aren't true and he's put all of that behind him, he had 2 sexual assault accusations in college. If they're not true and we don't have that rear its ugly head and he's a good citizen going forward, he's going to be a huge steal for them, where they got him 53, I believe, is where they took him. That's super value for a guy that led the NCAA in sacks last year. And then Emory Jones is a versatile O-lineman with great upside, played alongside Will Campbell. And I think he's got potential to be good. And they overall, Baltimore has a number of guys, Starks and Green and Jones, and even the cornerback they took late, whose name is eluding me right now, out of Rutgers, Rutgers. Shiano's turning that program around. You might see the home run potential with this Baltimore draft class. The Panthers, I thought, were winners, but I'm gonna specifically say Bryce Young, who played very well the second half of last year. After being benched and coming back in, he turned things around, played very well down the stretch. You had Tet McMillan out of Arizona, one of the better high point potential wide receivers. Trevor Etienne, and they added a solid receiving tight end. Jimmy Horn could sneak into the rotation at wide out. They got him with their last pick in the draft, their last pick of the draft, not the last pick. But they addressed real needs. And I mentioned Scorton earlier. He might be the steal of the draft when we look back in 2027, right, in a couple of years. We might look back and say, man, Nick Scorton is that dude. Because I just think as productive as he was in the SEC, there's something there. And even if he's not, even if he's, an above average or even middling guy, I think there's real value where they got him in the second round. Vegas, they got their guy in Jeanty. There were some conversations whether or not they would try to move up to get Ashton Jeanty. I think he fits perfectly with what Pete Carroll is going to try to do there. You add Geno Smith to the mix. You're going to want a good running game, but they also add Jack Besh, who's has a really good story. If you don't know the story with Tiger Besh, check that out. But he's a real upside guy. Got him in the second round. I think he's a reliable wide receiver. And then Tonka in the fourth for them, huge value. He's a guy, he's a space eater. He can penetrate and collapse a pocket. He was a big reason why the edge rushers at South Carolina were able to do the damage that they were able to do last year, because he was eating up a lot of space in the middle, eating up blocks, and leaving the freaks of nature on the edge by themselves. Name to listen for next year, and anybody who tunes into Tailgate, you already know it probably, but you will know it next year for sure. Dylan Stewart there in South Carolina, he enjoyed the benefit of Tonka Hemingway being just a mauler in the middle. So Vegas did well. The only issue I have with them is that they didn't address the quarterback of the future. I thought Shedeur potentially would be a nice fit there with the Brady connection. I don't know what happened there, if he rubbed them the wrong way as well. Not really sure. But Geno it is going forward. I know Pete's got a small window. I don't think he's going to coach 10 more years, despite the energy that he brings to the table as an older gentleman. But I was waiting for them to potentially look at moving up somewhere, or just taking Shedeur somewhere in the third, fourth, something like that. Never materialized. So I think maybe they're a team that if the bottom falls out of this thing and Geno's not good and they just can't stop anybody on defense, you might end up looking at potentially them being somewhere in a position to move up or get one of the guys that's going to be a much more highly touted quarterback prospect next year. Big winners here for you fantasy players out there. If you're looking for Chargers players, Omarion Hampton is going to get 200 totes as a rookie. You could book that. I know they just offered a UFA tender deal to J.K. Dobbins, but Hampton is a hardball guy, and he's going to get a bunch of totes, and he's going to be a guy who's going to go high in fantasy drafts, and he's going to bring value as a rookie. Trey Harris, big time red zone and vertical threat for Herbie. And we know he is willing to take risks, trusts his arm, and he's willing to put the ball up. Mike Williams was a guy that, for all of his injury history, he was a guy that when he was healthy, he and Herbert had some chemistry, and he was able to go high point balls, and Herbert gave him chances. He's going to do the same thing with Trey Harris. And then getting Gadsden in the fifth, I think, gives him versatility at the tight end position. And I think that this Chargers offense has some kind of supernova potential this coming season if they can really rein in a little bit of the turnover potential with a guy like Herbie and kind of open this thing up. I think they've got some supernova potential there on offense. All right, so now the negative. We're going to finish with a little bit of negative here, and then I'm going to kind of bring the positive back up because I'm suddenly a positivity guy when it comes to Washington. I'll talk about Washington's draft at the end here. Being a homer here for Washington at the end, but to recap a little bit with the Jags, I thought it was too expensive for them to move up. I thought they did fine outside of it, but they kind of mortgaged the future for a guy I'm not big on. If he ends up being excellent, I'll regrade this draft and give him an A+. I just think that they spent too much to move up and get a guy that I just don't think he's going to make an impact on either side of the ball that warrants the number 2 pick, let alone an impact on both sides of the ball that warrants moving up to the number 2 pick. The Bengals, I thought they whiffed pretty bad on the Shamar Stewart pick. He was so underwhelming on the actual field. Underwear Olympics, he did fine, but like I mentioned earlier, like his own teammate had more sacks in one season than Stewart had in 3 in the SEC. So I just don't see it with Shamar Stewart. I thought they whiffed hard on that. They didn't address the O-line. I thought maybe Gray Zabel would be a good pick for them where they were sitting. He ended up going literally the pick after them. But I do think they redeemed themselves a little bit at the end of this draft. Taj Brooks, if you don't know the name, played at Texas Tech. He's a powerful runner who can also play in the passing game. Pretty good blocker, but he's a guy who can run kind of wheels out of the backfield, angle routes, can be a safety net, but can also pick up the blitz pretty well. He could be a really sneaky pick for them late in the draft. Outside of that, though, I really just think that they had a very kind of meh draft. But I think Taj Brooks could be a bell cow there, especially if Chase Brown continues to get nicked up. They may end up trying to use Chase Brown in a more sparing role anyway, having a guy like Taj Brooks who can saddle that load and be a bit of a horse in that backfield. I didn't have a ton for losers, only two, so I'm not going to be super, super negative about the draft. But we're going to pick the energy back up a little bit, and we're going to talk about Washington. I absolutely love the Josh Connerly pick. I already talked about that a little bit earlier. I think it gives us a perfect slotting across the board on the offensive line with the talent that we have. And I think suddenly we have an offensive line that, I don't have to worry about as much. We're going to protect the crown jewel in JD5 and give him a little more time to hit guys like Terry McLaurin. Maybe even have a little better run game this year. We really struggled outside of Jaden making things happen with his legs and just how athletic and creative he can be. Maybe we get a little more, a little less of Brian Robinson getting hit in the backfield and a little more of him taking on linebackers and safeties one-on-one downfield. The Amos pick, though, Trey Amos, I thought that was a home run pick. I didn't see it coming. I wasn't sure how they felt about him. I thought we were going to go edge rusher, so I kind of had DB off my board early with Washington. But when Trey Amos slid and to hear AP talk about him, Adam Peters talk about him, the GM, he said we got 2 first-round picks with our first 2 picks. I couldn't agree more in terms of the value for each of those guys. Trey Amos is a dog. He's a guy who's going to stick his nose in. I think he's a guy that's got the length. He's got really good athleticism, not great. And I think he's a guy who's going to give us an option there to move Mikey around even more this year. I think Mikey projects in terms of his best value as a guy who really locks up with the other team's best kind of slot receivers. Did a phenomenal job on the outside last year in a position of need. But I think if we can put Marshawn Lattimore on one side, Trey Amos on the other, and let Mikey Sainer still just follow whatever guy we really want to match him up with, I think that makes us very dangerous in the defensive backfield. And yeah, I agree. I think the talent is there. It might take a week or two in the season before we start to see them really lock it down. But I really, really like where our offensive line is right now. And then I want to talk about one more pick. 2 more picks here that we made. Jalen Lane, I think he has the potential as a slot and gadget guy. I also think he projects value in the return game. But I also think that, understudy under Debo, if Debo gets nicked or if he's too expensive to keep long-term, if, that sort of thing, Jalen Lane could be a guy that's going to replace him. He is small in terms of height, but he is a solid 190-plus pound guy with 4.3 speed. And any Virginia Tech Hokie fans out there will know he's a bit of a jitterbug, but he also will run through arm tackles. So he's a guy that I think projects a lot like a Deebo Samuel. I don't think anybody's going to be Deebo Samuel. I wouldn't say that, but I think he projects a lot like it. I think Cliff's gonna like designing things, maybe even with both of them on the field. Maybe you flank the quarterback with both those guys. We ran some 3 guys in the backfield with Robinson and Eckler, and then we'd either have another running back or a tight end in the backfield last year. A lot of kind of loaded backfields last year. So that could be something that we could see with, a guy like Jalen Lane, maybe Debo. Then you put Brian Robinson in there possibly as like the power option. Out of that, I think there's a lot of creativity that could be there. Kane Medrano, fastest linebacker in the draft. I know the Underwear Olympics. I talk about it all the time. I don't necessarily put a ton of stock in it, but tell me a guy that can cover the field. Cool. Tell me a guy that's going to learn from Bobby Wagner. Cool. Maybe we've got the heir apparent to that position. The knock on him is that he's not a thumper. He's not real physical like a guy like Bobby Wagner, but I think you get him in the building, maybe put some weight on his frame, and he learns behind Bobby Wagner for a year, 2 years, depending on how long Bobby's still going to play. I think that's potentially if we got him in the late stages of the draft as our heir to the throne when it comes to the middle linebacker position, I think that's a lot of value. I also think that Medrano could be a sub linebacker. His speed, his athleticism, early in his career before maybe making that transition to be the Mike linebacker. But I think early on he could be a sub guy, in some of the three linebacker lighter box packages, nickel, and some of the dime maybe potentially if you're going to have, a heavier look to a dime package with more linebackers versus more DBs. He could be that guy. But overall, we maneuvered picks, picked up Tunsil, picked up Debo. We moved Dotson last year and got a pick out of that and kind of converted that over. I thought the value of our draft was very high this year. So I'm still on the positive side of things when it comes to Washington. I know that's not always been the case for me, but we're coming around. We got JD5, and I think we had a good draft. And making the NFC Championship game last year, probably 2 to 3 years ahead of anybody's possible schedule, I think was great, a great experience for folks. But I also think Adam Peters and crew went out and built to capitalize on the window we have right now with a rookie quarterback or a rookie contract for our quarterback. It's like the most valuable thing in sports, rookie quarterback contract. So you got to take advantage of it when you can, when you find a good one. So seems like they're doing that. Overall, interesting draft. The Shedeur stuff was weird. I don't know exactly what that looks like and what was going on there, but we'll see with him if he's going to get a fair shake in Cleveland. I thought it was a great draft in terms of depth and building roster. There weren't necessarily like knockout superstars at the top of the draft, with the exceptions of I think Abdul Carter's a guy who I now can't root for because he's a Giant. I think he's a guy who's got superstar potential. Travis Hunter, I obviously had the name and the Heisman that comes along with it. And then, from that point on, essentially Genty, I think, is a superstar, but the running back position is still kind of on the come up. But it was really a draft where I think a lot of teams took advantage and said, we're going to stay put where we're at, and we're going to get guys who we can fill the roster. I know Washington did that with their first 2 picks, and guys slid to them that they really liked. I know a lot of teams that, it felt like they did similar. So it was an interesting draft. Day 2 and day 3 got a little more busy with trades. Day 1 was a little bit slower than we're used to. But overall, teams were building rosters out with this draft. We're in trade season. Things are open right now. Usually, though, this time of year it's quiet, so it might feel like there's just no door open for trades right now. Usually, when you get close to camp, that's when you're going to see someone gets hurt, somebody maybe holds out, that sort of thing. You might start to see guys get moved, but I don't anticipate, with maybe the exception of I don't know that the Steelers are willing to trade TJ Watt. And then, are the Bengals going to finally make, pull the trigger? I don't know. There's a couple that are still hanging out there, but I have a feeling a couple of them are going to go all the way till camp before a team makes the decision. Washington, I know, is still looking at the edge rusher position as something that maybe we still want to make a move. So maybe that'll be, camp opens up and we realize we really need to make a move. Who knows? But anyway, that wraps up our draft recap episode of the Blitz, brought to you by Backyard Sports. We'll be back in probably a couple of weeks, and we'll talk. Rodgers is still out there. Is he going to sign with the Steelers? And then we're going to be getting closer and closer to camps and mini camps and understanding who Hard Knocks is. We've got the schedule review coming up. So we'll probably be back in a couple of weeks with an episode of the Blitz. Stay tuned on the page. We'll get it posted. But appreciate the activity in the chat, Robert, Dad, and Robert. Thanks for keeping me honest on the mute button right out the gate. For those tuning in later, I appreciate it if you make it past the first minute and a half or so of the episode, where I'm kind of just talking at a muted mic. So, but for everybody else here at Backyard Sports, this has been the Blitz, brought to you by Backyard Sports. We are